Hey everybody, it's Marco, and today we're going to talk about data analytics. Talking about data analytics while walking is kind of an interesting subject to pick, but it's important because I had a couple of people already now be interested in what is involved with being a data analytics person, right? What does a data analyst really do? Well, that's a good question. What does a data analyst do? Well, a data analyst essentially is a person that will be responsible for trying to figure out what is happening inside of a business, what is happening inside of a business process. They will try to analyze information about marketing, about sales, about user engagement, and other information. A lot of times data analysts fall into different types of categories, right? And these different types of categories will actually define what kind of analytics these people will be doing, right? So a data analyst position can be something like business intelligence. So business intelligence essentially focuses on what is happening inside of my business at any given point in time, right? Where you take this is where you take data analytics and you use a vast amount of data that you have inside of your business, and you summarize it down to something that is useful to your particular business case, right? With business intelligence, usually you'll hear the term OLAP and OLTP, right? OLAP is online analytics platform, and OLTP is online transaction platform. OLTP will be where you will be feeding your transactions and where your application will continuously update a database. And then your OLAP will be typically a different database where you will pull all your data in a certain timely fashion. Let's say, for example, every 15 minutes, you transfer the data onto the OLAP platform, and then you run a scan of all your data. You go through all the data, and then you summarize that data, and you give information to your business leaders, like things like key performance indexes, right? Or something like that. Or for example, how many screws has our screw making machine produced in the last hour, and is the production trending upwards or is it trending downwards? And that's what a business intelligence data analytics person will do. But that's not, that's just the start. That summarizes well what a data analytics person typically does, is taking a vast amount of data and summarizing it into some kind of usable form. Now, data analytics is very important also in the actual maintenance and monitoring and failure analysis and security of the systems. Now, what does a data analytics person do in those fields? Well, what they do is they collect logs from applications, from servers, from CM devices, from devices that run security like firewalls and intrusion prevention, intrusion detection devices and things like that. And they aggregate the logs, and then they come up with queries that they run on these logs that will detect any kind of anomalies, right? So what are the anomalies? Well, let's say you've got a web server, right? You got a web server, and suddenly your web server starts shooting out a certain specific error, right? You did an update of your code, and now you're getting 404 errors everywhere, right? Because the code of the web server was broken, and it's pointing to some kind of resource that is not available, and then you get 404 errors. The analytics person can detect that 404 error happening much more frequently than previously, and of course will be able to they'll be able to set up usually an automated alert that will go to the developers, say, yo, big problem, let's fix this. And they'll also be able to extract from the logs, they'll be able to extract which requests are causing that 404 error. And the request could be for some kind of image that doesn't exist, or some kind of file that doesn't exist, right? And the developers can quickly fix that. Same thing with security, right? An anomaly where somebody is trying to brute force, there's some kind of machine that's suddenly spiking in CPU because there's probably a Bitcoin miner installed on it, and things like that, right? That can help you increase security because you have control of your logs and you use data analytics practices to increase security. So other aspects of data analytics are things like, for example, trend analysis, right? So trend analysis is, for example, you've got a business and it's got some kind of brand, and you use the Twitter and Facebook and other APIs to see how your hashtag or your name for your brand is being perceived, right? And now what you need to do is you need to pull all the occurrences of that sort of brand or hashtag or something like that, and then you need to pull that text in. Now here is where data analytics becomes very interesting, because if you're just pulling in how many times your brand has been mentioned on Facebook or Twitter, that doesn't give you information whether that mention is positive or negative, right? So what you can do there is use machine learning and feed information about the words into a machine learning system, and that machine learning system can classify those words. So with machine learning, you can do things like encode words into numbers, right? You say each word gets a specific number, and the more positive the word, the more positive the number, the more negative the word, the more negative the number. I'm super simplifying this just for the sake of brevity here. I'm not really explaining how word encoding works, right? But essentially, by classifying the numbers, by giving them a numerical form, what you can do is you can see whether your brand is trending positively or is trending negatively on these social media platforms. And that's something that's very important to a lot of brands. And this is where also data analytics turns into machine learning, right? Now, of course, in both cases, like the business intelligence and let's say the security case, you can also add machine learning on top, right? So instead of detecting things like an error happening in the log, right, you can detect something like a trend of errors happening over time, a trend of CPU usage rising over time, right? Maybe you get an attacker that's really intelligent and they're trying to hide their activities, but by hiding their activities, they're not hiding the actual usage of resources, they're not hiding things that they're trying to do. And with the machine learning pattern, you can use trends, you can use things like you know, patterns that usually wouldn't look suspicious to find that suspicious activity or that anomaly. And then finally, things like credit cards or things like bank statements and fraud detection on those platforms, right? Bank accounts and credit cards. When you use your debit card or your credit card, your bank can have a system where they detect whether your account is being used, you know, in a normal way or something that would be typical to how you use your account, or whether this transaction that's just happened is something unusual. And this is where credit card companies and banks are investing a lot of effort into, by adding not just the data analytics that tell them, you know, where there was possible fraud yesterday, but where a possible fraud is happening right now, right? They analyze millions, billions possibly of transactions per second, and they figure out, okay, this transaction, you know, it's not happening in the right geography, and it's a pretty weird charge that this person has never done, so let's try and just do a two-factor authentication, or let's just deny that transaction because we know that that's going to be a fraudulent transaction, or let's issue an alert to the bank, and then the bank can call up the customer and say, hi, you know, we got this transaction, did you make this transaction or not? It's an easy way to do things, right? But you need a system that will learn on a very, very big number of transactions what the typical transactions are for not just one user, but for your whole user base, right? So that's where a lot of science is happening. So that's basically what a data analyst does. Looks at data and finds little things, little pieces of information that are important to the business, important to protect your clients, important to the security of the system, etc. All right, this is where I'm gonna end this video. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're interested in more, please do subscribe. Do consider subscribing, because it does help my channel grow, and it makes me feel like somebody is listening on the other end. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.